Before the long-term problems with Kane were apparent, Wells had already been plunging ahead with his next projects for RKO, sifting through 40 possible subjects in the script department, from the brothers Karamazov to A Life of Beethoven. Partially out of desperation, he settled on Booth Tarkington's Southern States historical novel, The Magnificent Ambersons, which the Mercury Players had performed on radio in 1939. Although The Magnificent Ambersons looks immediately like a Wells picture, he had to make it without two of his most crucial collaborators. Neither art director Perry Ferguson nor cameraman Greg Tolan was available. Tolan's replacement, Stanley Cortez, had worked almost exclusively in B pictures, but Wells was intent on camera virtuosity at least as impressive as Kane. This was to create appalling difficulties for sound supervisor James G. Stewart.
There were many sound problems on Magnificent Ambersons. The most important was that it was shot at Pathé Studio. And one of the early scenes that were shot was the big family reunion party and ballroom with the whole family. Orson shot this entirely on a crane. And a crane was the biggest crane that we could get in Hollywood. The floors of Pathé Studios were probably at that time 25 or 30 years old and were never meant to carry that kind of weight. Every time the crane moved, the floors squeaked. It made the soundtrack absolutely impossible to use. And he went from one person to the other, if you've seen the picture, of course, went from one person to the other and from one group to the other with continuous dialogue from the various people.
What did you say your name was?
Morgan.
Oh, well, I'm certainly glad you're back. It's nice to be back, too, Jack. It's been a long
Who's that?
Oh, I didn't catch his name when my mother presented him to me. You mean the queer-looking duck?
The who?
The queer-looking duck.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
The one with him is my Uncle Jack. Honorable Jack. I thought everybody knew him.
It looks as though everybody ought to know.
He called me onto the stage and said, we're going to have to replace all this dialogue. And I, of course, looked at it, shocked, and knew that I had to do it.
Where do you live now?
We've lived all over.
What do you keep moving around so for? Is he a promoter?
No, he's an inventor.
Oh? What's he invented? Georgie. Grandfather?
Just lately, he's been working on a new kind of horseless carriage.
For the time, it was an astonishingly elaborate piece of post-sinking, though there was much more to come.
Yes.
Later in the picture, there's a crucial scene where the entire family spend an afternoon out in the snow. It becomes a confrontation between the old world of the horse-drawn sleigh and the new world of the horseless carriage. Wells wanted absolute realism. He refused to shoot it in the studio, and there's not a lot of snow in Hollywood.
And Mr. Wells wouldn't use the ordinary things of shaking papers and stuff. He wanted the real thing. So he located an ice house in the east part of Los Angeles and put the set there. I think it was the sled. This young couple was in the sled and it tumbled into the snow. They crushed these huge blocks of ice and with a wind machine blew them over the set. And it was just lovely, and their breaths were all steaming and so on. And on the back of the set, at the other far corner, there were these sticks lying and standing against the walls, and they were frozen fish, and they smelled bad. But it looked beautiful. It really looked beautiful.
Pretty right, Lucy. All that snow becomes you. That's right, it does.
In the picture, you see the family riding through in the horseless carriage. And the four people in the carriage are conversing.
Come on, all aboard!
Orson's solution to this, which is really unbelievable, he recorded the dialogue on a non-synchronous phonograph record. It wasn't even in sync with the camera.
Oh, we've got to depend on it.
And he played it from a balcony up in this big reverberant cavern. You couldn't stand on the stage and understand the dialogue. And the people in the carriage were trying to mouth to it, and it was not going to be in sync with the picture anyway.
You're the same Isabel I used to know. You're a divine, ridiculous woman. George, you'll push to get started. Push.
Divine, ridiculous, just
So I watched Orson, and I watched what was going on, and I thought, here we go again. So I walked over to him at the end of the scene, and he stood for a moment. He turned around and looked at me and said, Jimmy, you're going to have quite a bit of trouble with this. I said, Orson, that's an exaggeration. I said, is that track going to be in sync with the picture? No, Jimmy, that's not. That's just playing. I made that in the office. So we did it, but it was a massive, massive job.
Your father wanted to prove that his horse's carriage would run even in the snow. It really does, too. Oh, it's so interesting. He says he's going to have wheels all made of rubber and blown up with air. I should think they'd explode. Eugene seems very confident. Oh, it seems so like old times to hear him talk. Broke the bank and wanted car.
I did this on the RKO music stage, as a matter of fact, without Orson being present, with each actor separately, went through and did all of their lines. Then I took and combined all of those lines, along with the noise of the horseless carriage. And I was very proud of it, very proud of it. And I ran it for Orson. This was our normal procedure. I did the work first and then got his opinion. I ran it for him, and he sat for a moment and said, Jimmy, it's fine, but I don't have any sense of motion of the horseless carriage in their voices. As soon as he said it, of course, immediately apparent. It was too static. It's his fault now that you see all the time in our pictures. But he was very conscious of it. So I did it all over again. And I did it over with a 12-inch plank suspended by sawhorses, myself sitting on it and bouncing it up and down while the actor or actress sat on the same plank. And I tried to match the little movements in the car, not successfully, but adequately.
I knew you were doing that. It was nice of you.
Wasn't much of a fool to speak of. How about that kiss?
Hear them sigh, wish to die,
And see him wink the other like the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo.
As I walked along, the boys below with an independent air. Hear the girls declare,
After all the effort that went into Ambersons, the irony is that the film was changed and savagely cut by the studio in Wells' absence. This sad postscript is now a familiar part of cinema history. It was a blow from which Wells himself says he never recovered.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
The reason for his absence was America's sudden involvement in the Second World War, with the bombing of Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The Magnificent Ambersons was still in production when Wells was recruited for the government by Nelson Rockefeller and John Hay Whitney and sent on a bizarre goodwill mission to South America. Its purpose was to counteract the spread of fascism. Wells received an official cable 2 weeks later on December 20th. This is it, the cable dated December 20th, 1941. To Orson Welles from John Hay Whitney. Dear Orson, we understand you are willing and may be able to undertake trip to Brazil, where you would produce motion pictures in cooperation with Brazilian government. Personally believe you would make great contribution to hemisphere solidarity with this project. Regards. What happened next was to prove one of the most disastrous episodes in Wells' career. It began with characteristic enthusiasm and flamboyance. Among the group detailed for South American duty and entrusted with a large part of RKO's stock of cameras was Joseph Byrock.
We left on Tuesday night. I called my wife at 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. Says, I'm leaving at 6 o'clock to go to South America. She said, 6 o'clock, you don't have anything packed. So I came home and packed and went to the studio and left. So that's how quick everything was.
Also assembled for the group, Secretary Betty Amster.
We flew down on a big Pan-American clipper ship. We made a slow trip down and saw a lot of South America on the way, and got the crew was aboard the ship. Orson was not, and we got to know each other pretty well, and they all seemed like wonderful, wonderful people to me and made a lot of fun of me. I was the only woman on the trip.